We have another great keynote this morning, and Ori joined Andre on stage briefly on Monday, as you recall. Ori's been in cybersecurity for a couple decades. He was the founder and CEO of 41st Parameter, which, as I think Andre mentioned on Monday, was sold to Experian back in 2013, and then set off and founded Tresona, which is essentially an insured authentication platform for very sensitive transactions. Ori will be joining us here in a minute, and I want to also just thank Ori again for the introduction of Frank Abagnale. Ori had that relationship, brought to me and my team the suggestion that maybe we invite him here to Keynote, and I think you'll agree it was one of the highlights of this year's conference. So thank you, Ori, and welcome on stage.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me in the back? Wonderful. Thank you for waking up early to hear this. My children are in the audience tonight for the very first, tonight, in China it's night. This morning, for the very first time, they'll see what I do when I tell them that I go to a conference. All right. If you heard me and Frank speak 2 days ago, we started Tresona in order to have the very first vendor that can ensure the authentication. When I was the head of risk at American Express, I wouldn't trust you logging into Yahoo and coming to me and telling me it's okay with $1 million transaction. It just doesn't work this way. Because if anything goes bump in the night, I can go back to my boss and say, well, I trusted Yahoo with their login. I'm not outing Yahoo here, but as you can see, unless there's trust, we cannot just take each other's authentications. It's not about technology, as you're about to see. It's about the trust we have underneath it. This journey today is not technical. I'm going to start with a laugh. I'm going to take you down memory lane of how did we get here. Today, when you look at the Russian mafia and Rockfish and all the groups that do this for a living, they don't use guns anymore. Actually, when you analyze crime, you see that people who use violence are people who did not advance with technology. The problem we face is really as old as time. If you think about masquerading or identity theft, it began right there. People ask me, why do you go on stage? I go on stage because at one point in my career, I got in the morning to the office, and I asked my boss a simple question. When we lose $10 million at the bank, where does it go? If you'd ever follow the trail of money, you'll understand why this is no longer a job for me, this is a passion. The money mainly goes to 5 things. And if you go to work every day, one second. If you go to work every day, thank you, I'm here until Thursday, try the veal. If you go and try and see where the money goes, it's actually going to these 5 things. And when you think about your job when you go back, it's not about technology and FIDO and SAML. It is about how do I do a great job so the money does not go to these uses. Narcotics, weapons, terrorism, human trafficking, and what I think is the worst of all, child exploitation of line. I'll give a plug here to an organization I volunteer at called Thorn. It was started by Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore. And essentially, many of the people here in the audience, their companies are participant in the fight against child exploitation online. The money does not go to buy gifts to someone's grandma. Some of the organizations that we're fighting make $20 billion a year. Raise your hand if your company makes more than $20 billion a year. I'm not going to raise my hand. There. Think about what you can do with that amount of money. I woke up early today to talk to you about what will happen with the e-disaster and why do we need an insured authentication, because otherwise we cannot prevent what's about to happen. Before 9/11, there was no DHS, there was no TSA. Yet look at the budgets that we came up with immediately right after. But we had to have a 9/11 for this to happen. Let's look at it a different way. You did not have any of these air marshals. You didn't have all that spend, and what created the spend is one event that was catastrophic. And if history teaches us anything, we need an E-disaster for everybody to realize we can't continue on the path we're on right now. What is that path, you ask? It's that. In a white paper we published, we said you have convenience, security, and privacy at odds with each other. I can make the most safest airport in the world where everybody goes through a full body cavity search before they go on a plane. So we're going to be very secure, but not very private or convenient. We can have an airport where you don't check passports at the front. It will be very convenient and fast, but don't expect security. What we're talking about is in a perfect world, you'd have these three things balanced, but that's a myth. I'd believe in Santa Claus before I believe in this. We're talking about creating a parallel and insured internet that for the first time will focus first on security and secondarily about convenience. In 1967, if I were to give this speech, I wouldn't talk to you about cybersecurity and insured internet. I would tell you, if you're a college grad, go into plastics. Now, some of us may be too young to understand this reference, especially my children. For that, I'm going to ask the video guys to turn on a quick clip so we can see what this is all about. From the movie The Graduate.
I just want to say one word to you. Just one word.
Yes, sir.
Are you listening?
Yes, I am.
Plastics.
Because this year is 2016, the one word, if I would tell you to go into, is cybersecurity. The more we move our systems online, the more we rely on logins, identities as a service, doing business in other places. You have to take this seriously because the implications are catastrophic otherwise. We live now in an era where it's the breach of the day or the breach du jour. You read these news articles just like I do. For the visual learners, before 2010, specifically when the Zeus malware version 2 began replaying sessions, we roughly had one big event a year. When Zeus version 2 was introduced, and now is on the market for $10,000 if you want to buy it, you can replay any session you want. So once you have malware on a CFO's computer that is transacting with Swift $100 million, you can come next week, replay that session, just change which account the money goes to. If we don't change that, we will not survive the next 10 years because this picture will not get any better. How many people know about this fake tweet that happened on April 23rd, 2013? Please raise your hand. About 50% of us don't know that this one fake tweet caused the Dow Jones in 90 seconds to tumble 150 points. The value of that is $136 billion. I don't remember us all rioting that day. I went to Starbucks. That's the largest heist in history right there. It already happened. And if you analyze what happened, you see that the Syrian Electronic Army placed that tweet on the Associated Press account. A lot of automatic trading in Wall Street picked it up as reality because the authentication was considered great. And all these things were shorted immediately. Now, if you knew this tweet was coming, what would you do? You would sell it short, as they did. And you see, because of banking regulations, when you move money as a wire, there's AML or anti-money laundering requirements and KYC. When you short stock, none of that applies. We just funded a lot of bad stuff that day. How many people realize that? That's why I wake up in the morning, because I understand what's the meaning of not fixing this problem. And I'm asking all of you here, there's no other room like this. Well, maybe there is. We should go find out. But there is no other room. This is the industry. If it's not going to emanate from here, it's not going to emanate from anywhere. The good news and bad news is that this cartoon is over 20 years old. Unfortunately, it's still true. To make my point, we have a short video about Peter the cat. I'm going to ask the video guys to turn that on for you. Thank you for Peter the cat. That alley reminds me of Bourbon Street. I don't know why. We're going to switch to the deck. And I love cats, but this is our problem. You can be anybody you want to be online. If you speak to Frank Abagnale, he'll tell you in 3 minutes how he becomes you, and it is scary. Let me just give you the highlights. Don't try this at home, because it works. Many people on Facebook tell people where they were born. Big mistake. Because now if I know the county in which you were born, you can go online and for $12 get your birth certificate. No one asks any questions. There's no law against it. When I take your birth certificate, which doesn't have the lovely picture of you, I can go to any DMV I want and say that I'm you. And now I get an ID that has your name, your birth date, my picture, and from there on I can go to any bank, and even if the bank follows KYC, which is know your customer, by the way, you missed the good parts, I'm sorry. If I go to any bank and show them this ID, I can open a bank account. I gave you the 101 of how this is done. If we don't fix that, especially online, if you're a bank that does business online, you have no idea who's on the other end. We are not fighting some machine. This is not a virus that once you have the cure for, you know it's done. You're fighting people who are very motivated, not some predictive system. And why they're motivated, as I said before, some of them make $20 billion a year as a gang doing this. It's enough motivation. You can buy some tigers and come to New Orleans anytime you want. What you're about to see now is what is happening with the money that is generated with the results of us not securing fully the environments that we're serving. I'm asking my young children to avert their eyes. These services are available on the dark web. Some of it is fuzzed out, but this is how much it would cost you to generate a passport, including a US passport, on the underground. I've held these in my hand. You will not be able to tell the difference. It's okay if you can't read this very, very well. You can just go and buy any citizenship you want and enter any country you want. The next set of services, again, they're fuzzed out on purpose. This is how much it would cost you to murder somebody, to hurt somebody. As you can see, it's just like a Chinese menu. Do you want a bombing simple or a bombing complex? You want it with fries. Folks, this is what happens. And if we don't stop the flow of money, I don't have good news for everybody. Death in accident. All right. What I brought is some of the things I've seen already in my past in order to make the point that if we don't insure the internet, if we don't create that layer, weird things will continue happening. The attack probability on any one of you or your systems is simply a function of the incentive. You see, a website that sells straw hats, from my experience as the head of risk, both at VeriSign and at American Express, does not have a lot of chargebacks or fraud. No one's interested in that because you can't turn it on the street to cash. But if you sell electronics, if you sell tickets to an event, if you sell Apple Watches, Android watches, right? You can easily turn these to cash on the street, and for that reason alone, the incentive goes higher. Many security experts say that the milk is already spilled because every time you hear of another breach, another 10 million IDs being stolen, you know that you can't bring that data back. And as a practitioner, you can either pull your hair out, if you have any left by now, or you can say to your boss, let's shut down this online business because I don't know how to defend it. If you're in banking, the storm that is happening in these weeks because of the SWIFT heist is insane. Some people are pulling their hair out. But what I would suggest you do is accept it. This is not the last breach we will see, but set your strategy accordingly as if the data is already out. What do I mean by that? Every time we introduce a new solution, it has a shelf life. Okay, if you think about SHA-40 as an encryption mechanism, it's dead by now. Why? Because computing power has gone so high. So when something is introduced, you see on the left, it's very, very effective. Then you have the crooks or the fraudsters figure out, how do I work around it? Then you have other ones publishing it in bulletin boards, including in Darknet, to show others how to do it. So you only need one wise guy to figure it out and 10,000 would-bes to do it. And then the effectiveness almost disappears and becomes common knowledge. The reality is when you try to tell your customers, be safe, pick longer passwords, don't listen to emails that look fake, you're not just talking to them on a chessboard with two players. This is like three-way chess. Why? Because the same email you send to your customers to be safe and not do something, the bad guys can say, do it, it's okay. And for that reason, it is so hard to use regular tactics online to fight fraud. Sun Tzu wrote the book, The Art of War. Just by show of hands, how many people read it? Right, 50%. I don't know if it's the same 50 who heard about the AP tweet, but if it's not, go read this book. What Sun Tzu tells us, you can go read it, it's as relevant today as it was 2,500 years when it was written, is if you don't know the enemy, you will not know how to win the battle. His last comment is if you don't know your capabilities or the enemy's, you will lose every single time. But don't believe me, and don't go by my word. I brought here a person who reads Sun Tzu, and if Paris Hilton reads it, so should you. Paris, I love you. All right. Here's another thing I want to leave you with. When you sit and have strategy meetings about risk, and you guys say, hey, I bet you they could do this, this, and that. If you are thinking it, they're already doing it. I wish I was wrong about this one. Every single time we put traps, either at banks, large merchants, or airlines, in my career, to see, hey, maybe there's a hole here, by the time you test that, it's already dripping. Someone has already thought this through and is already monetizing it. So always assume that if you can think about the crime, it's already being done somewhere. I brought some examples from my career that not necessarily show that every time to catch online criminals you need to use big data or algorithms. Sometimes it's just your noggin. Courtesy of Neiman Marcus, one of my customers in the past, I'm going to show you something that is a great example of how human ingenuity works both ways. A customer ordered $16,000 worth of stuff from them to this address in Florida, and then said, MNR, merchandise not received. Calls customer service and says, I'm sorry, all that stuff I ordered, where is it? I didn't see it. Of course, they call UPS and their signature on every single item. So the customer either is telling the truth or not. You know, when you go look for a new home or an apartment, some of them allow you to do a virtual tour to see it from the inside. Well, what do you know? This very address is a house for sale, and there's a virtual tour. Should we take the tour? This chandelier is from the catalog. This chandelier is in the house. This rug is in the catalog. And there it is in that room. Guys, sometimes to catch people, all you need to do is just look at the evidence. There's no big algorithms and computing power. It's just good old detective work. I'm not going to comment about the taste of this person. I'm just going to comment that the chandelier is right there. But I didn't get it. All right. I'm going to wrap this and move on. They bought a lot of stuff, as you can see. All right. Again, I'm not going to comment about the... Maybe it's related to the Eye of the Tiger opening song. Who knows? Okay. Let's do an experiment. We're all smart here. We're all security folks. We all know what not to do. Let's talk about the price of shame. By show of hands, how many of you think that your customers pick strong passwords when they select them? Raise your hand. I either need an eye check or no one's raising their hand. Okay. After the RockU breach, for the very first time, because the algorithm for hashing these passwords was so easy to break, we could see for the very first time the top 10 passwords. By the way, the number one password is 18% of all the accounts. Why am I showing you this? Not because people don't pick easy passwords. I think you knew that. But I want you to turn your head as to what would a Frank Abagnale do with this information. You see, most of our authentication system, I bet you are limited to 3 tries and then you're out, right? And we thought, like good people, yeah, I think that's good enough. But if I knew that, I don't need to try 3 times on all of your accounts. I really don't. I need to try once on all of your accounts, and I would open 18% of your accounts. Not outing the UK, but in the UK, this is a huge problem. A lot of soccer fans. I can tell you what the number one password right now. People are people. So the point is not to pull your hair out and say the fight is lost, is knowing this and thinking like a criminal. What would they do? Is how would I subvert this? So when we talk about our customers and what passwords they choose or don't choose, it's like us versus them. I now want to ask you a question. By show of hands, if you would find a USB stick in Bourbon Street, would you pick it up and be curious about what's on it? Raise your hand if you'd be curious. I'll be curious. I didn't say I would stick it into my computer, but I'll be curious. Okay. Here's what I want to do. I want to do a social experiment with you. By the way, this is the first time we're doing it. Turn on your laptops or your cell phones, go to this URL, promise there's no viruses there, trusona.com/s for survey, and answer this question truthfully. How many of you would stick it into your computer? Just to see what's on it. What if it said confidential material on it? What if it says HR records and it was in your parking lot? Let's give it 1 minute, and then I'll ask the AV guys to show the results. But answer truthfully. You'd be curious to see what's on a USB stick that you found in your parking lot at work that was marked CEO's pictures with, no, I'm kidding. Pictures from the trip in NOLA. No, kidding. My CIS trip, midnight to 8 a.m. I'm kidding. Truthfully, how many of you would look at that? AV guys, can we, here, I'm going to turn to the next slide. Okay, so we have yes, no, and maybe. I consider the maybes a yes, just so you know. Sorry I didn't warn you before. But this is the price of shame. a lot of us don't want to just raise our hand and say, I'm going to do something stupid. But you have to understand human psychology and human psychology. What was I about to say? I don't know. I'll ask myself soon. You have to understand the psychology and the psyche of the people. What will they do? And then set the strategy to that. You can't sit there and wait for them to pick a long and good password. You can't hope for them not to pick it up. Assume that the milk is spilled, and now work around that. Okay, let's go back to the decks and we can wrap this. I see already arrows and quivers aiming at me from the back. Get off the stage. All right. So, if we get the message that curiosity of humans killed the cat, thank you, Peter, for being a great add to my deck today. I want to leave you with a free tip. What can you do today? Here's Matt. He's a very famous reporter at Wired. His entire digital life was taken over in 1 hour. Go read about it. This guy is as secure as we are. He writes about security all day long. He was not happy when his Twitter account and Google account were taken over. And the reason is because, like us, he's a creature of habit, and he picked the same long password in many different places. My tip to you is this. I know it sounds very simplistic, but you can do an amazing thing. Not daily, not weekly, but just monthly. Go change your passwords. Because even if they were stolen and are traded right now on the dark web, you are rendering them useless. It's that simple. Do it. And if you will do it, and people will ask you, in those cocktail parties, hey, what do you do for security? I'm so afraid. Just say this. If enough of us will just change our password regularly, assuming that the milk will be spilled, as we said before, at least we're rendering that milk rancid. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil, folks, is for us, for good men and women, to do nothing. I'll leave you with that thought. And this is why me and Trusona team are venturing on a new journey to ensure the internet, as in create an internet that I can shed light 100% on who's transacting with me. Not on everything you do. Some things I understand are private. Like I go to the My Little Pony site sometimes just to buy my daughter something. I don't need you guys to know that. American Girl, sorry. But when you need to move $1 million, when you want to vote one day, when you want to pay your taxes, you, not the other guys who claim to be you and ask for credit, you really need something that is so good that it can be secured and insured. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.